Good. Welcome to our webinar, which has been brought to you by the MSc on Health, Wellbeing and Sustainable Buildings at UCL. We've got a taster lecture today on the subject of what makes a healthy urban green space. And really it's a chance to hear from myself as programme lead for the MSc and our student Georgina about the experiences of being part of the MSc. So what we're going to do today, and just a reminder that the event is being recorded, what we're going to do today is for the next hour, you get a chance to find out about the experience of being part of the Health, Wellbeing and Sustainable Buildings MSc from our student ambassador, Georgina Wilson-Cousins, who you'll get to meet shortly. I'm going to deliver a taster lecture on a topic that we look at within the MSc. And I'm Dr. Gemma Moore. I'm an associate professor in health, wellbeing and communities, and I'm also the programme lead for the MSc. But as well as hearing from us, we do want to hear from you. So we have time for you to ask us questions and we'll address them. Please do that via the Q&A function and we will answer questions at the end. And there is no such thing as a silly question. So if you want to ask anything about the topics we're covering or anything about the MSc, please do so. This is your opportunity. Okay, great. So I'm going to hand over to Georgina.
Hello, everybody. So effectively, there are 6 core modules for our course, and this is basically to help everybody kind of upskill to have a similar understanding based on the fact that we come from different academic and working backgrounds. When we have the 6 core modules, some of the work will be individual based, and others will be group based. Within these aspects of work, we will also have work that will sometimes be including something called co-design, and that is the opportunity to connect with shareholders that is not limited to just private organizations and directors, but also end users themselves. And that's really interesting because it's not something that has been done for very long. But we're hoping that when you include the individuals who are going to enjoy the space within your design, then the design is actually going to be much more beneficial and more sustainable for the future. In addition to our 6 core modules, we also have 2 optional modules. And per course, you get to be suggested a few modules that are encouraged based on your academic journey. However, there's also the opportunity to choose optional modules that will be within the institute, and that's because we are part of the Institute of Environmental Design and Engineering. And this is a way to allow students who have engineering backgrounds, architecture backgrounds, etc., to choose modules that will help them to develop, would be most suited for their career prospects and just learning. To me personally, I've actually chosen inclusive design modules, and that's because for our dissertation topic, I've decided to kind of go down the inclusive design and accessibility route. And that's because I have a civil engineering background, which isn't human-centric at all. And that's one of the key things that I really love about this course. So I get to kind of develop in a way that is different to my working academic background, but in a way that will develop me in a way that I'm hoping will be beneficial for my career. The other thing that I must mention is, although we have our academic aspect that we need to develop during our master's course, when you go into the working world after the course, it's important to know how you've developed is going to be beneficial. So I particularly chose the Bartlett because they have an excellent record of evidence-based research. And there are so many different ways to research beyond what you've been introduced to so far. And within our course, we get to work out different methods, not just from academics, but through collaborating with industry partners as well. When you are doing your work, you also are encouraged to connect with the student union, and the student union can help you with picking up the other softer skills that will help you with your development. So, for example, for me, I decided to sign up to be a representative for my student, for my class, and I also engaged with representing university students throughout the university as well. I think that's it for now, Gemma.
Okay, brilliant. Thank you, Georgina, for that excellent overview of the course and your experience of being on the course, as well as, I guess, looking at the wider benefits for being placed within the Bartlett at UCL. So thank you for that. Just a note, Georgina has to go at 2 o'clock for a lecture, but I will be addressing the Q&A. But any other questions that you might have, do just get in touch with me. If it is about student life, we can pick that up outside this webinar and talk to Georgina afterwards if needed. Okay, so for the next around 20 minutes or so, I was going to just give a taster lecture on a topic that's very close to my heart that we cover within the course. And the title I've posed is What Makes a Healthy Urban Green Space? So this is a taster lecture of from a topic that we do look at within one of the modules. It's a module that I lead. Georgina mentioned it on the slide before. The title is Health and Wellbeing in Cities, Theories and Practice. So although the MSc looks at a lot of the issues and determinants of health from a building perspective, the module that I lead encourages students to think about those issues and think about how they play out at a neighbourhood or urban scale. And so one of the topics we look at is urban green space and the role that has within the urban system, but also how it impacts upon our health and well-being. But what I've done today for this taster lecture is not only talk about the content of that and why urban green space is important, but I picked this as because it's a topic that we cover throughout the course in terms of thinking about how our research that we're undertaking here at the Bartlett feeds into our teaching, but also how students can undertake their work, particularly their dissertation work, in a collaborative way. And Georgina touched upon that, because what I'm going to show is how a few students who looked at this issue did their dissertations collaboratively, and leading from that have had real world impact. So I'm going to also share a policy tool that came out of our teaching that 2 local authorities are using in terms of making decisions about the design and management of their green space. And this has come from student work. So it's a really great impact from this engaged approach to teaching. So by the end of our session together, this sort of taster lecture, I hope that you'll have an insight into understanding and defining what the value of green space is within the urban system and how green spaces contribute to our health and well-being. I'm going to share the Healthy Parks Framework, which is this policy tool that's a living, being used policy tool. And again, I want to show that as an example of how the research that we're undertaking here at the Bartlett and that the students have been involved in has gone into practice. And so from hearing about this work, hopefully you'll get an insight into our approach to teaching within the MSc and how there can be opportunities to foster that collaboration between education, research and practice. So if we think about green space in the city, I guess green spaces are one of the one of the determinants of health or factors that influence health that have this aspect of multifunctionality, because they provide benefits a range of impacts, from providing spaces where there can be environmental impacts through biodiversity, through providing opportunities for water runoff, from the ecological benefits that come from having green space in the city. But they can also provide incredible social impacts through providing spaces for people to come together, to connect, to actually see difference. Again, spaces that are being used by different populations can be really, really valuable. They can also be a key economic impact within the city. So particularly in London, we've got some fantastic green spaces, which are tourist destinations, and they can have a draw that way. Spaces and green space in the city can also provide a space for democracy. And as I mentioned with the social impacts, there's a space to see different people, different aspects of the population using the same space. They can also be a space to, I guess, demonstrate different opinions in terms of sites for protest. So open space and public open space in the city has this core multifunctional way, providing a service to people, not just an environmental or ecological benefit, but a range of benefits that intersect. And these lead to health and well-being benefits. However, like, I guess the research, a lot of the research says that the access to green space isn't equal, and there are guidelines for proximity to green space, and some research that came out of the Barcelona Institute for Global Health pointed out that actually, with increasing green space in the city, particularly in European cities, it could prevent up to 43,000 deaths per year if we followed recommendations on enabling access and proximity to green space. The project that I'm going to mention, which is the Healthy Parks Framework, which was developed with 2 local authorities in London, it came from a place where in one local authority, in one area, Islington, 71% of residents, and in another, 61% of residents in Camden don't have direct access to green space. And many of them do live within proximity to public spaces, many of them are quite small public spaces, but didn't have that direct access. So access to green space is a real barrier in terms of achieving those health and wellbeing benefits. Another thing to consider, although we know and the evidence there is that route between green space and health, is the distribution of impacts. And so what is coming out of the research is that the highest environmental burdens are often in low income and ethnic minority neighbourhoods. So we don't all have the same experiences of the built environment. And green space access, more research is coming out about who does have access to green space. And green space access disproportionately benefits those that are white, that are able-bodied and more affluent communities. So it's unequal. Linked to that, again, coming out of some research being undertaken in Barcelona, is looking at how we're adapting and changing the built environment to include more green spaces. But with that, it can increase this thing called gentrification, where areas are being improved, but linked to that, the property prices are being improved. And so what comes into play is that maybe people that are living there may not be able to afford to live there once green space has been improved. So this topic of green gentrification comes out. So the point being, although there's a vast range of benefits that come from the provision and access to green space within the city, particularly that public green space, the distribution of those benefits are not equal. So how can we, and what makes a healthy urban green space, knowing that the evidence exists about the range of different benefits, but knowing actually it's quite nuanced in terms of who's experiencing those benefits, how can we ensure that we make green spaces healthy? And this was the question posed to us by 2 local authorities, our neighbours within UCL, Camden and Islington, who were interested in making health a core thread of their decision making. And the relationship with them came out of a dissertation project led by one of our students who was looking at that relationship between green space and mental health outcomes. And she did that in collaboration with the two local authorities who had a strong interest in this topic. And they came to us following that research saying, but this is great, this research exists, the evidence is there, the links are there, but how can we change our practice to ensure that the decisions we make ensure that the healthy spaces that we design and manage are healthy for all the population? So I've mentioned the topic, and I'm just going to say how we try to answer this and explore this question via our approach to research and education within the MSc and within the faculty. So within the MSc, and Georgina gave a lovely overview of the range of activities and the range of modules, but within our induction walk, one of the things we do on our first week, and maybe I think it's our first day together, is we go on an urban sensory walk around the local area, so in the borough of Camden that I mentioned. And this is a methodology to explore our different perceptions of the built environment. We go into green spaces, we talk about what do we hear, what do we notice, what do we smell. And this is a methodology to try and tap into not just the visual perspective, but actually our other senses, experiences of the built environment, and the different experiences related to our own perceptions. The other thing we do throughout the course, again, just this one topic, but we look at a range of different topics on the MSc, but with green space, but we have a site visits. And one of the site visits we go to on the module that I mentioned today, the health and wellbeing in cities, we go to a site visit to a community garden called the Calthorpe Community Garden, located near UCL, where it's a small urban space that is in a premium location in terms of property prices, but they have maintained a community garden where they have a biodigester, they have a food growing initiative, and community-based allotments. And we see how that functions, and it's a real adaptable space because it is run and delivered for the community. So that's a site visit that we go on to and start the discussion about how do we maintain and govern the spaces that aim to have these benefits to the urban system. As I've mentioned, there's opportunities to collaborate, particularly in term 3 when you'll be thinking about your dissertation topics, and we work with you to shape those dissertation topics. And so the example I'm talking about today all came from Ruth Hines' work that she did with Camden and Islington local authorities. And although it started with a piece of dissertation research, we've continued those conversations with others involved, so other student projects coming in, as well as my own research at UCL. So what this does, looking at this intersection between the teaching that we do, the research questions that we're trying to answer, and the engagement with practice, this example with policy practice, but some of our work is with industry, some of it is with communities on the ground. What drives us and what really is passionate for us is we're looking at a topic that is extremely relevant, and the questions that are being answered, we don't have all the answers to them. We need to undertake that research. But what we want to ensure is the research and education that we're delivering is responsive to those real world questions. We're really keen, and particularly at master's level, to ensure that there's opportunities for partnerships and collaborations throughout that teaching and education experience. And we believe that that leads to skill development. So an opportunity for you to put the research skills that you develop into practice and learn different skills around how do you actually apply this knowledge in the real world. So the example of the policy tool that was developed coming from Ruth Hines' work and the other conversations we've had was called the Healthy Parks Framework. So this is what we developed with the two local authorities. What it does is map the 10 components that lead to, or were felt to lead to, the creation of a healthy park. So back to that question, what makes a healthy green space? As well as the values which are around the outer of the wheel that also are important considerations to put these ideas into practice. And so this was also designed, I should say, this was designed by another student, one of our students who did the inclusive design module that Georgina mentioned, and now works as an inclusive design practitioner. She had a graphic design background, and we employed her to work with us to take those ideas and turn it into a visual framework that people could use. So this process to create the Healthy Parks Framework involved some dissertation work that I mentioned. It also involved a review of other frameworks that exist that try to articulate the connection between green space and health. We ran a number of co-design workshops. Georgina mentioned co-design to understand the different perspectives of the factors within a green space that influence health and well-being. We developed a prototype of the framework that has then been tested, particularly tested in the 2 local authorities that we're working with. And we've also been doing a strand of work to share that framework wider so it could be used outside those case studies and with others. And we've just undertaken an interesting piece of work with Highgate Cemetery in London to think about how the cemetery spaces offer different well-being benefits compared to public parks and public green spaces. And that's leading to an adaptation of the framework to be called the Healthy Cemeteries Framework. So I just came from a really exciting meeting about that. And I must say, all of this did start with a student dissertation project, and it still has opportunities for students to be involved and pick up the work as it continues. So what the Healthy Parks Framework does, and what was created, was an attempt to show the different characteristics within the park that promote health. And so some of the things in there, I've just highlighted one, was this idea of like having a variety of landscapes. Some of the components are really, really subjective. So there's something around spaces providing fun and activities, but fun for me might be very different from fun to you. So the sort of different indicators come into play. There's also one of the components is around sound and quietness as well. So some of them can be quantitatively measures, but others are actually much more subjective. The other thing the framework tries to do is articulate the different values that underpin the delivery of the components. And so that was the values around the edge of the wheel. And what we have tried to do is provide the evidence that underpins that. So the research between those key characteristics, those determinants, and how they influence health outcomes. But this is a tool to be applied within a policy and real world context. So I thought I'd just quickly show you how that framework is being used since it was created. So we use it within the course. This is a picture from some of our students from this year's cohort who have been using the framework. Again, I think we did it as part of an induction activity to get people talking, to again bring together different people with different perspectives to talk about their experiences of green space. So we use it within education and engagement activities to provoke those conversations. The other way it's being used is as a guide for decision making. So back to that core ask that we had from Camden and Islington local authorities, who wanted a way to ensure those health benefits were at the core of their decision making, and how they could make the business case for them back in the local authority to whatever decisions they were making for green spaces could have health as one of the outcomes, and as they putting health as the core of the decisions. And so an example of where we've done this is the framework was used on a space within Islington, and I hope these slides will be shared afterwards, but there's a lovely video about the redevelopment of St John's Garden, which the Friends of Group, so a local community group, use the Healthy Parks Framework to shape the redevelopment of the garden, to think about how this existing space could be improved. So all their design decisions came back to components of the framework, where they used them to think about the current status of the garden and what could be done to improve it. So it's a lovely video. I think I'm in it, my colleague Lisa Griffin's in it, where we talk about the use of the framework on that space that has been now completed and opened. It's also being used at the moment as a tool for research and assessment. So under those components, we have indicators, so sites and spaces can be assessed, and that can be looking at a space in its current form and seeing how it could be improved. It has also been a way for the local authority to think about their green spaces as a portfolio, because not every space would score highly, and maybe a high score in everything isn't really achievable. It's about having a balance across the different spaces within a neighbourhood. Like some spaces might offer that opportunity for restoration, for quietness, while others might be where you go to exercise and have fun or activities. So for the local authority, it's about them understanding and assessing the spaces as they currently are and thinking about that portfolio, that network of spaces and the offer within those communities. So just to conclude, before we get a chance to hear from you and think about any comments that you may have about either the talk we've given or about the MSc in general, there are a range of tangible and intangible factors that contribute to this idea of a healthy park or healthy green space. I think one of the things that we learned from that co-design process was that what's deemed as a successful place for one group could be an unsuccessful place for another. And green spaces, we all have our own environmental preferences of what makes a successful space. And so spaces, as much as those democratic benefits are really key, but that also means it's such a personal experience. But what co-design does offer is that we can tap into those different perspectives and understand the different languages that come with thinking about the green space benefits. Green space needs to be responsive and relevant to users' needs. So that's why co-design is really, really important. And having a tool like the framework can bring together those different perspectives and have those conversations about what green space matters to people. And just zooming out on all of this is the fact that the role that students and the university have within such projects. And so, as I said, we were brought in initially starting with a dissertation project that was looking at the connections between green space and mental health. But the university and us, we've played a really key role in this process to lead to action and change within how the policymakers and how green space teams are thinking about improving green space in 2 London boroughs. And this has come from us working together in terms of thinking about different knowledges that we bring. And these relationships that I've talked about, I think Ruth's dissertation was back in 2020. And so we've had like 5 years of keep working with the local authority, providing those opportunities as a topic that we've been looking at within the MSc, but looking for those opportunities to collaborate and build those relationships so we can work together. So I just wanted to show that example of a topic that we look at in the MSc, but also try to demonstrate how we work and some of our ways of working to connect the research we do, but also within the educational experience and the opportunities to lead to impact and real world impacts from the work that we do here at the Bartlett.